Welcome to all to the 11th episode in a series of webinars showcasing the use cases and benefits of Copernicus, the Earth observation component of the EU Space Program. My name is Sofia Oterugo-Bono. I'm part of the Copernicus Support Office, and I'll be your moderator today. This 11th webinar looks at how Copernicus data can be used to develop a more sustainable fashion industry. I should mention that this webinar is being recorded and it will be shared on the Copernicus EU YouTube channel. To make the webinar a bit more interactive, we will be using Slido for live questions. So if you have downloaded the WebEx app, you will find Slido to the right-hand side of your screen in the Apps tab. If you're joining us directly from your browser, you can access Slido using the link shared in the chat. You may respond to the questions that will pop up on Slido as we go, and also you may ask your own questions based on the content presented today. So feel free to type in your questions so that we may answer them during the Q&A session after the end of the presentations. So just to, as an icebreaker, we start with one question, which is, we would like to know, how would you rate your knowledge about Copernicus? Now, to begin, let's go through the agenda for today. We will have two presentations from experts in the field, Gunter Zeug from Terranea and Conrad Bielski from EOXPLORE. Following both of their presentations, we will open the floor to the audience to ask any questions that you may have. So please feel free to type in your questions on Slido. Now, before I give the floor to our speakers, let me introduce them. So our first speaker today is Gunter Zeug. Gunter is a geospatial applications expert and has more than 20 years of experience in the private sector, as well as with the EU institutions. Since 2014, he's managing director of Terranea, dealing with business development, marketing, and general management, having a focus on the development of innovative spatial services. The company has executed many different consulting and research projects for clients such as the European Commission, the European Environment Agency, the German Environment Agency, the European Space Agency, and private sector stakeholders. Between 2010 and 2014, Gunter worked with the European Environment Agency as project manager for Copernicus. From 2006 to 2009, he worked as a researcher at the European Commission Joint Research Center. Employed in the Global Security Unit, he has been involved in several projects on developing security and crisis-related spatial intelligence. In addition, after his graduation as a geographer from the University of Munich in 2000, Gunter started his career with GAF on one of Europe's renowned consultancies in the fields of geoinformation. Our second speaker today is Conrad Bielski. As EOXPLORE's founder, Conrad focuses on delivering high-performance computing solutions to clients' geospatial analysis and processing needs, specifically focusing on automatic information extraction and scaling of computing output. Conrad has a PhD in geography from the Université de Montréal in Canada. He worked as a postdoctoral researcher at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, focusing on automatic information extraction from various imaging spectrometer data. From 2004 to 2011, he worked on research and development within a variety of projects at the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. From 2011, he consulted for the European Environment Agency and worked on a number of European Space Agency and EU-funded projects, taking advantage of Earth observation data for land cover mapping and the development of services linked to natural hazards. Since 2012, he has led EOXPLORE's Research and Innovation Group and worked on Horizon 2020 projects and the implementation of flood and wildfire models. Now, Gunter, the floor is yours.
Hello, good afternoon. Thanks for having us. It's a great opportunity for Conrad and myself to present some of our activities in the field of the Copernicus Climate Change Service, and more specifically on our activities on a recent project that we did in relation to cotton and climate change. What I can maybe say as an introduction is we both, Conrad and I speak also for you, we both come more from the land monitoring side, and we have lots of experience with the land monitoring service and the production of those products, validation of those products. And yeah, when you have a focus on land, you sometimes forget about the whole Copernicus ecosystem, and that the CAMS, the atmosphere service, the climate change service, the marine service have such a large number of so valuable products that you can make use of and integrate in your products and in your workflows. So in, I think it was 2019, we had the opportunity to do a use case for ECMWF on the use of the C3S data and services, the backend, their backend on a topic, on a domain that we could choose ourselves. And we had made an investigation and figured out that on climate change, or cotton and climate change, there was not that much information available yet. And we thought that could be an interesting use case for us. And that is how we started. And so this afternoon, I will start now with the first presentation. I will give more a general background about cotton and climate change and the industry, the market, or the value chain. And Conrad will then give an overview about the technical solution that we had developed during the project. So the screen can be seen, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can see.
So cotton, everyone knows cotton. Everyone has a shirt or a pillow made out of cotton. And for centuries, it was the most consumed fiber in the textile industry. And it was actually also a strong driver during for the Industrial Revolution in England, when everything was automized with the first machines. But from the end of the 1990s, beginning of the 2000s, cotton was overtaken by synthetic fibers, especially polyester. And today it's still the most consumed natural fiber in the textile industry. And considering the global fiber production, it's around 22% of the global fiber production, compared, for example, to polyester, which makes 54% market share of total fiber production. Just here a graphic on that. So you see here the dark blue and the grayish colors. All that is synthetic fibers, and then we have this green piece, which is more or less looks quite stable over the years. And that green part of the columns here is cotton. During the last years, the cotton production increased. During COVID, it decreased a bit, which was also related to reduced consumption. And now the industry is taken up again. I think it's also very interesting to think about the growing countries, because cotton is really a global thing. I guess many of us know or know the history, the sad history in the southern US countries about cotton production, but it's really everywhere. It's in Latin America, it's in North America. Many African countries grow cotton. Australia is a strong provider, India, and in the last years, China became more important. And to show that also, I have this graphic here, this animation, starting from the beginning of the 1960s. And it's running a bit fast now, but you see that the production, the output of the different countries changed over the past years, the past decades. And it's actually quite interesting. We wait until it ends now. So it's quite interesting that for many years it was Australia, the leading market, and then actually European countries, Greece and Spain, also including Turkey, were very strong in cotton production. And then in the beginning of the 90s, it changed. China showed up, and it took over a few years ago, and now China is the leading producing country in the world. Cotton is a big business. So on the one hand, business in terms of monetary values, but also from an employment perspective. So I read numbers that around 25 million people would be employed globally in cotton farming, but it's a much bigger thing because it provides direct livelihoods for more than 100 million households in 75 countries. And what we need to keep in mind is that a large amount, 90% of those countries are in lower income countries. And on top of the farming, we have additional labor, millions of people working in transportation, in ginning, in baling, in storage, and so on. So it's a big global market. When we have a look at the plant, cotton is an annual plant. It grows around 1 to 2 meters high. And the yield that we get after around 6 months growth is fiber on the one hand, and then flowers or the balls. And in those flowers, we have the seeds, which are then used to grow the next period, the next season again. And the plant requires a long frost-free period and a certain heat and lots of sunshine. And so it prefers a warm and a humid climate. That's already something to keep in mind when we think about climate change. The ideal air temperature is between 20 and 35 degrees. It can sustain higher temperatures, but only for a short period of time, not very long time. And the plant does not like longer rainfalls or frequent rainfalls during the maturing, that's then the summer period, and especially also during the harvest. Climate change is now expected to affect the global cotton production. Because what I just mentioned, the plant needs specific temperatures and moisture levels to produce fibers of good quantity and quality. However, research also showed that cotton productivity is improving with an increased carbon dioxide level because of increased photosynthesis. And so that's on the one hand, there is a positive effect in some areas, but also a negative effect then in other areas when we have then higher average temperatures, more frequent extreme weather events and so on. But I actually saw one reference where the author said he believes that the negative impact through climate change could actually be offset through the higher productivity of the plant. But yeah, that's a result of the research. Also something to keep in mind when we talk about cotton and when we talk about textile, it's not only the farmer and then the fashion brand or the retailer, but the cotton value chain is much more complex, I would say. So on the one hand, we have the farmer. The farmer is producing the plant, growing the plant, harvesting the plant. And then we have a process that is called ginning. And the ginning is when you separate the flower from the fiber. That's the ginning process that is usually done then from an intermediary. And then the flower itself is then, you get these large balls of cotton, and that is then traded. So you have a cotton trader in between. And after the trader, we have a factory or a business creating the yarn. And after you have a yarn, you start then weaving your fabric. And only then you have a company, a factory producing then the cloth itself. And then that cloth is delivered to the fashion brand and then to the retailer. So it's quite a long value chain. And you can, of course, imagine that climate change is affecting or can affect all these stakeholders in the value chain. However, I mean, when we talk about sustainability in general, or when we think about ESG, environment, social governance, or CSR, corporate social responsibility, we have to keep in mind that it's not only the effect of the climate change, of the changing climate on our activities, on our doings, but also the other way around, the so-called inside-out effect. So how does our activity affect the environment or climate change? So that we can measure how we can measure more or less the carbon footprint of the shirt that I'm wearing. When we talk about climate change in cotton, it's not only about the negative effects, but we also have to keep in mind that cotton has actually a mitigation potential, because the plant itself sequesters around 0.5 kilo CO2 per kilogram of the fiber. And organically grown cotton has a rather low carbon footprint, because when you don't put synthetic fertilizers on the plant, you can keep the emission rather low. It's then the fertilizers that lead to a high amount of greenhouse gas emissions. So cotton is more climate friendly compared to other synthetic fibers that are used in the textiles sector. And so interesting is that when we talk about the whole cotton value chain, it's not the production that leads to the high impact, but rather than further down the value chain. I read the highest impact is from the consumer in the end. The energy that is required to wash your shirts, your clothes, and to dry the shirt, that has actually the highest greenhouse gas emissions. Then the second highest is the production process itself, and only the third highest or the lowest is then the growth of the plant. So looking now at the textile industry, they have, of course, an issue. When you're a jeans producer or a t-shirt producer, and for a long time, your whole or a large part of your collection was made from one agricultural commodity, namely cotton, then you could, of course, run into some issues in the future. And now we have several measures. On the one hand, voluntary activities of the industry who try to find a way how to mitigate these risks. And on the other hand, we have legislative measures. We have this term of circular economy, so it means recycling, keep product very long in the process, in the use. There are companies who start selling used products or recycling, repairing products. That is on the one hand, and on the other hand, the industry is also developing new fibers, or so new synthetic fibers, artificial fibers, but on the other hand, also looking for alternative natural fibers, such as hemp, for example, for jeans. So what we also have to think about, on the one hand, we say now the textile industry, they should have the textiles, the clothes in the longer use. We don't want to use that much natural resources, that much cotton in the future. But when we think what I have said before, that it's such a big business and there are so many households linked to the production of cotton, so they actually depend on our consumption. It's a bit of a perverted system, but they depend on our consumption. So when we reduce that, what about them? What about the smallholders? And so they need to adapt somehow, and they have to diversify production. And we talked to several stakeholders in this whole value chain that I had shown before. And our feedback was, we did not talk to farmers themselves. We didn't have the opportunity, but we talked to a representative from a development agency. And they said, well, the solution of a farmer is just to change the crop. Some farmers seem to be, especially in the less developed countries, seem to be more flexible just to changing crop. When one is not growing or is not bought on the market, not sellable on the market, then they change the crop. And that was already shown during the last years now, when during COVID, the sales of cotton decreased. that farmers changed crop. And also the cotton production area, especially in African countries, decreased by quite a lot in the last 2 years. So diversifying the production, changing the crop. On the other hand, the farmers need to or think about soil and water conservation. A big issue is fertilizer and the impact of fertilizer on the soil and on the water. And another topic which is sometimes critically discussed, the use of improved varieties, and that means genetically modified varieties, plants. And there is already in many countries, in India and in Australia, they use already GM varieties or species which are adapted to the local growing conditions. And this is something from an ecological perspective also debated. What happens when the genetically modified plant, or is there an impact? What impact could it have on the natural environment when you have GM plants? So this is something that we came across. That's something that needs to be discussed in this bigger discussion about climate change, or in general sustainability in relation to climate change. That's it from my side so far, and I would hand over to Conrad to give you now some insight in the tool that we had developed.
Thanks, Gunter. That's a great introduction. I hope, because again, we're not sure what the audience is present, but I will just to continue from some of the ideas that Gunter has presented. We're not cotton experts. As you can see, the legislation is changing, the world is changing. So where can someone start with the information that they need, maybe to make the right decisions, future decisions? And this was actually why we got into this idea of the cotton application on the Copernicus Climate Change Service. So my name is Conrad Bielski. I'm from EOXPLORE. My background is, again, like Gunter's, Earth observation. So I'm generally looking at the land as it currently is and trying to see how that changes. But obviously, from a customer perspective, we're looking for all kinds of solutions. And today, the ones that we are offering are based on open data, industry standards, and specialized processing workflows. And from that perspective, Copernicus, including the climate change service as well as the atmosphere service, fall right into that sort of sector. So from a business side, this is exactly why we're trying to exploit that information. Just to give you a bit of background on that, I mean, we understand the difficulty our customers have accessing and taking advantage of this specialist information. I mean, most people within the cotton value chain that Gunter has identified, yes, they've heard of climate change, but what can they do about it? And this is why these types of, or at least we think these types of applications are very valuable to them, to at least start understanding, even visualizing, based on their needs, and then maybe finding the right people to talk about that. So as I say in my final sort of point here, it's really to start the dialogue and find appropriate solutions. Just as a quick sort of info, I mean, the people from the Copernicus Climate Change Service as well as the ECMWF, yes, they're scientists, they're the specialists, and they love trying to find solutions, which is very good for the rest of us. So for my presentation, I will be going sort of deeper into the Copernicus Climate Change Service, C3S for short. And actually what I would like to do And I don't know, Sophia, if you can just put the link here, the application that I will be going through, because actually if you're watching this, you can go ahead and start playing with the tool. I will be going through it as a presentation, but certainly it will help in any discussions or questions later on. But as I say here, so as a tool, it's the goal of the Copernicus Climate Change Service is really to help with climate change mitigation, adaptation strategies, not just for policymakers, but businesses as well. And hopefully that's the kind of information we're going to be able to show you today. So from the C3S perspective, what is the focus? The first thing is, how do you get access to this data? And that's what the Copernicus data store is. So that's the CDS. The application actually takes advantage of that. The other very important thing is the fact that it's an open source solution. So anybody can take advantage of not just the data, but the actual application that we're showing. So yes, we're concentrating on cotton, but within the fashion industry, I'm sure there's other issues that can be dealt with that are climate related, and you can start from either our application or another one that's available through the Climate Change Service to develop it further in the direction that you need. Again, demonstrate how it can be used. So in this case, is we focus on cotton production, and again, hopefully bring more stakeholders to access and take advantage of this fantastic information. So if you did use the link, this is what you should see. There's a few tabs, all of them important. I'll go through most of them, but this is just to get us discussing on the cotton application in particular. And of course, the big question is, if we have such a application, where's the data coming from? What is the climate data? And in this case, what we are taking advantage of is the ERA5 dataset. So this is ECMWF, European Center for Medium Range Weather Forecast, reanalysis version 5. So this is a dataset that has been evolving, and it will continue to evolve. It's data that is covering the period from 1940 to present. So it's a lot of past data that is being taken advantage of, and it provides hourly estimates of a large number of atmospheric, land, and ocean climate variables. Again, we're not going to be covering all of them. This is let's call it very specialized stuff. But it's just to show you that there's a lot behind this. So what you're going to be seeing here is really just a small slice of the capabilities and available information that can be taken advantage of. So again, the improvement, let's say, of version 5 is definitely a higher resolution, both space and time, and the assimilation of more observational data sets. So what that actually means is the ECMWF and their partners are looking into old data sets, any kind of information that they can find that can improve our knowledge of the past climate, and take advantage of that for modeling the future. So in particular for this application, we decided to use a specific, oh, sorry, I forget what the SIS acronym stands for. It's in the notes there, but essentially taking the ERA5 data and using it and applying it for agricultural variables. So that's what we're going to be using here, are the agroclimatic indicators. Okay. And in particular, we're just 10 different data sets, because we can get programmatic access to the C3S data set. So basically what that means is there's a huge database in the back, and this toolbox, the Copernicus data store toolbox, allows us to get access to that and all the variables and all the models that are available there. So that's what we're doing here in the application. We're taking the data sets that are available, packaging them up into information that would be relevant to the cotton stakeholders, and then presenting them in hopefully interesting ways so that further analysis can be done, further discussions and ideas can be moved forward. So if we go actually to the current application, this is what you should see when you open it up. And again, as I said, this is all online, available, open to everyone. So you can use it. You can choose the different types of variables that are available and see what happens. I mean, essentially, that's the idea here, is to potentially use it, answer some of the questions that Gunter had put forward, and yeah. Sorry. So if on the left-hand side, you have available actually, and this is linked also to what Gunter had said. So for currently, we integrated the 12 sort of most productive cotton countries. So if you click on the country of interest, you will see the different countries you can choose from. And then within each country, we chose the regions that are being used for the production. So of course, not every region is sort of producing cotton, and that's the reason why that choice has to be made. If we consider the way the information is presented, it's both in space and time. So from a climate perspective, that's temporal, but as well as location. And in order to produce the relevant statistics, we're looking at regions. So here in this case, you can see the different regions. I've chosen Greece just for fun, and the highlighted sort of in green region is Kentucky, Macedonia. So that's how you know which region you've chosen. But on the map, you can just click the different regions, and that will go through your allow you to choose that. So as I said, on the left-hand side is the location with the map, and then on the right-hand side is where the model and variable choices and results are shown. So again, as I mentioned, there's a lot of data back there. I won't go into the different specifics of it, but the first variable that the user will have to choose is the type of climate model. And as you can see, even within the Copernicus service, there are included different models from different organizations, and those are chosen here. Again, too much to sort of go into, but if you want, in the documentation, it's very easy to find out what are the differences, you know, who produced them, and which one would be most relevant or which one you should choose. But just from a model perspective and a statistical perspective, you can think about the assumptions that are being made from each model and then decide whether that's something that's appropriate for your application. The next choice then is the RPC scenario, so the representative concentration pathway. And essentially what this is sort of, you know, how do you think from a citizen perspective we will be dealing with climate change? So as you know, we can sit around, do nothing, and continue as we are, or we can really try hard and try to reduce the emissions for the that affect the climate, And again, these are the scenarios that are linked to the models. So that's another choice that can be made, just to see how over time that model will affect, based on those decisions, the region where the cotton is being grown. The last one is historical data. Again, because that's not modeled, we know that information. So someone can actually go back in time and for example, say, Gunter mentioned Europe used to be a very productive area for cotton. Now it's not so much. Is that climate related, or is that more market related? One can actually see how in the past the climate was, and whether it was more appropriate for the production, and of course then the models and the RPC scenarios move that information forward into the future. And then the final variable that can be chosen are different outputs for analysis. So these are actually the outputs from the different models and scenarios, and that includes the precipitation, the temperature, seasonal climatology, and cotton growing days. So cotton growing days is basically linked to the requirements that cotton has. So these are, it's something that Gunter also mentioned, and one can see how that changes based on the choices in the other variables. So here is just a quick output, as you can see from the precipitation. So in the different time periods, what's going to be the maximum number of days of precipitation, the minimum number of precipitation, and then at the bottom you can click over the time periods. So current, so let's say 2011 to 2040, future 41 to 70, and much further into the future. And here you can see the differences because over time, I mean, these are definitely from a business perspective much longer time frames, but from a sustainability perspective and a decision perspective, these are information that can be used today. And here's another sort of example when it comes to the temperature output. So again, I didn't put any animation, but if you are looking at it online and you click through the different years, you will see these bars going up and down, and they're related to sort of the maximum temperatures, the minimum temperatures, and the means for the particular area that you're looking at. One thing I also did want to mention, seasonal climatology. Why is that interesting for a cotton grower? So as Gunter mentioned, on the one hand, the expectation is maybe that the climate changes are going to improve the potential for cotton growth and yield. However, extreme weather is definitely another very important impact, because sure, if the cotton is growing very well, but then right at the point where the harvest should happen, all of a sudden there's going to be more chance of heavy rains, hail, other types of extreme weather, even wind, that may actually destroy or have a much greater impact than climate could. And these are the types of analysis that the user of the C3S can take advantage of. Most importantly, for those who are very technically inclined, all of this is available to you. So if you want to go in there, change the code, maybe add a different region to your analysis, that's what you can do from the source code. Of course, you just have to register as part of the CDS, or the Copernicus Data Store, and the toolbox, and you can go ahead and update the code and use that, and maybe reuse it for other applications rather than cotton. So just for those who don't know, this is Python, and it is a popular language, and it's well supported, not just within the CDS, but also outside. So plenty of places to be able to get help in order to update that. So again, what's the impact of having such an application? The toolbox can be run with a minimum of inputs. As you can see, even as a non-specialist, you can just click through and start seeing some changes and interpreting the analysis. Even just from the different variables that were shown, many different scenarios can be chosen and view the effects of that. And hopefully this will encourage users to dig deeper into why certain things are changing, or whether they're going to get better or worse, and hopefully maybe even ask more questions about their particular situation. Again, the other one that's very nice, and hopefully you saw that from the application, is that the results are very pretty, and they easily can be cut and pasted into reports. So this is something that, again, can be, from a business perspective, already used directly by non-specialists. So CDS, Copernicus Data Store added value. Huge access to climate-related data. Again, this wasn't the goal of this presentation, but once you start going in there, as well as even on the page of the application, you will see from the documentation how much information you have access to. Again, you don't have to worry about storage. You don't have to worry about processing. All of that is done already through the Copernicus service, and it means it should bring a lot more users, and hopefully you can become part of the community there and discuss any issues that you have in developing your own ideas. So again, it's just helps get beginners on board, and hopefully build even more sophisticated scenarios and analysis. And that's it for me as well. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Gunter and Conrad, for both of your very interesting presentations. We now open the floor to any questions from the audience. And we have a first question, which would be directed to Gunter, because in your presentation, you mentioned, well, you focus mainly on the carbon footprint of cotton. And I was wondering, because you mentioned that cotton actually has a lower carbon footprint than synthetic fibers. Now, when we analyze the environmental impact of textiles, we also have to take into consideration the water footprint. And so I was wondering if you had any information on that, and if it's higher for cotton or for synthetic fibers.
Yes, Sophia, thanks. That's, of course, a very important question. And in cotton production, you have to distinguish between rain-fed and irrigated. And yeah, in the less developed world, you have rather rain-fed, which means they are much more exposed to climate change. And when you're irrigated, you have less impact. And I also read in a source that it is expected that in an irrigated environment, climate change would have actually quite a limited impact, as long as the temperature levels do not increase too much. But even the temperature, this growing window, is actually also quite large, between 20 and 35 degrees. So that's a big area in which the cotton can grow.
I see. And this maybe is a question for both of you. In the development of this application, what were the biggest challenges that you faced?
Maybe before Conrad can answer that, maybe technically, there was a demand from ECMWF that everything should be developed in their environment. And our original idea was that we build a dashboard and just use the API to feed in their data into our environment, but that was not wanted. And these are, I would say, the main issues, but Conrad can explain more about that.
Exactly. I mean, from an application perspective, just first trying to find out what the customer needed. And again, I mean, you're having this webinar to try and get the fashion industry to start thinking about it, because yes, climate change is important. So we were actually trying to figure out what details from a climate perspective would be interesting. Again, what we realized is just because of the fact that the knowledge about where what variables are useful was already a challenge, we did decide to keep it simple. Again, that's why the interface basically shows main areas, main models, and the most useful, at least, variables from a growing perspective. So that's and again, that could be used for other types of industries as well. So yes, cotton is very important. From another technical perspective, so this is actually implementing in the CDS. As with any new toolbox, yes, there were some growing pains. Luckily, it was in Python, and I have to say that the libraries are constantly being updated. So the version you see here is definitely not the first one that was submitted, but it's very much cleaned up, much nicer presentation, especially when it comes to the visualizations of the results. And I think that's important. If somebody does want to push the dialogue further, they have to be able to show some pretty outcomes. And I think that's very easily done within the toolbox itself. That said, you can take advantage of the code that's there. It's freely available. Copernicus has made sure that the license is very open. And if you register, then you will also have access to the other community that's within the toolbox. So even if you're not a specialist, from a community perspective, there's a lot of people inside the both C3S and CAMS who are going through the same issues and are more than happy to help, share code, etc. So I think from all those different sort of aspects, it was I wouldn't say easy, but definitely not the worst experience we've had. Yes.
Now, you mentioned that one of the challenges is also understanding exactly the needs of the users. So I was wondering, have you cooperated with any stakeholders across the value chain, and have you focused on a specific part of the value chain, or have you gone all through it?
No, when you remember the slide that I had showed, where I showed the different stakeholders in the value chain, we had actually really contacted stakeholders in each domain, only the farmers. We did not have direct contact to farmers, only through the development agency. But of course, it would have been very interesting to talk to an American farmer or an Australian farmer, for example, who grow cotton also in a different way. I mean, more machinery, more automated, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting, maybe to follow up, interesting was that, for the development agency, yes, climate change, or to all of them, climate change, they were aware about climate change, but actually not so worried. For the farmers, we were told that farmers, especially the smallholders, they would be flexible and would change the crop. Then when one crop is not growing, is not sellable, then they could change to another crop. The traders and also then the producers, that was actually a bit surprising that their answer went in the similar direction. They said, well, when we don't get the cotton from from the market in country X, then we go to country Y and we will get it there. However, I have to admit, we had these discussions, Conrad, was it 2019 when we started the project, or 2020? And that was before we had the latest EU legislation about sustainable supply chains and all that. So I'm quite sure we had not followed up with the stakeholders, but I'm quite sure that this opinion also changed now, that they cannot simply say, when I don't get it in Burkina Faso, then I go to Uganda and buy it there. That will not work in the future. So yeah, everyone in the value chain has to, or in the supply chain has to have a look and think about the sustainable supply.
Yeah, it's interesting to see, and it will be interesting to follow up on how the industry and the whole value chain changes with this new EU regulations. And in that sense, also looking towards the future, what are the next steps that you foresee for the application? Do you plan on further expanding the potential analysis, or expanding the areas of coverage, or adding other data sources aside from C3S?
We discussed it during the project, and we thought, yeah, we could come up or should come up with an own viewer. So just getting the data through the C3S API and feed that into an own dashboard. And that is still something on our agenda. That depends also a little bit on funding, of course. We also have to have a look, because there are in the meantime quite few of similar tools available for free, and quite powerful tools. The World Bank, for example, has a very, very nice tool about climate change outlook for different countries and impacts in different sectors. So that's also something to keep in mind. And when we continue with that, then we need definitely to expand to other crops, and not to stick only on the cotton that is too small and from a market.
Exactly. I think, you know, as you saw from the presentation, this is let's call it much more generalized. And I think that if we have, customer requirements, not only from climate change, but as we said, with more linked to the legislation and then the whole supply chain, that will definitely then start moving towards also, what's happening now. So, CAMs can be in there, again, from a land cover change perspective. Is the production or the supply chain actually happening? What, the whole monitoring of that supply chain, that's definitely going to expand and take advantage of more Copernicus services, including Sentinel, etc. Yeah.
Well, we look forward to see how the application evolves. I'm
Thanks.
very interested to see what the next steps will be. And well, I don't want to hold you any longer because I don't want to go over time. So I want to thank you both again for participating today and for giving this very interesting presentations and for answering all of these questions. This is certainly a topic that's very interested in general, but also, as you mentioned, with the new EU regulations that are coming up regarding circular economy, I think it's very interesting to know that Copernicus data can actually be used to pursue those, or to push for those new policies that are being developed. So once again, thank you very much for participating.
Thank you.
And we're reaching the end of this 11th Copernicus webinar. Once again, thank you very much for your very interesting presentations, and thank you also to the audience for your participation. We hope that you learned something new today about how Copernicus can support the development of a more sustainable fashion industry. And before you leave, we have just one final Slido question. We would be very happy if you could tell us how useful you have found the content of this webinar. If you have any other questions or comments, you can always reach us through our online channels, which I invite you to follow in case you aren't already doing so, to stay up to date with Copernicus. Thanks again for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. Have a nice day and see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.